What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Eric Wilson. And the New York Rangers had a big start to free agency as it began on Saturday into Sunday, my birthday. The Rangers went on and signed 10 total players into Saturday, and they really did get very busy this weekend. So we're going to go ahead and break down all of the signings that the New York Rangers made and discuss our three favorite signings from this weekend and how this will impact the team going into the 2023 to 24 season. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topic down below in the comment section. And go ahead and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Fireside Rangers. Without further ado, Eric, how are you doing today, my friend? And what are your thoughts on the Rangers' big start to free agency?
I'm doing good, and overall, I'm pretty happy with how Chris Drury started off free agency. We knew that we weren't going to go out there and make any crazy signings like we did last year, with Trocheck. But with the money that we had available, Drury was able to, round together like a solid group of like 10 guys. And, the only name that's like really, really groundbreaking was kind of Blake Wheeler, but, he's a little old. So it's like nothing too crazy right now. But I'm pretty overall satisfied with what he did. He added a lot of depth, and despite not signing any star players, we know all of the problems and holes that were in the team from last season, and they seem to be filled from at least on paper pretty well. And it leaves us with just enough cap space to hopefully re-sign both Alexi Lafreniere and Keandre Miller. So pretty much all that's left to do this offseason is get that done. But I guess we can just get right into breaking down what we did yesterday.
Yeah, let's discuss Blake Wheeler first and foremost because the 36-year-old winger, this is probably your Patrick Kane and also your Vladimir Tarasenko replacement here. This is guys likely to play in the top six. 36 years old, like I said, but the Rangers, they signed him to a one-year, $800,000 contract with up to $300,000 in bonuses after the Winnipeg Jets bought him out of his five-year contract on Friday. So Blake Wheeler, in 2022 to 23, 72 games played, 16 goals, 39 assists, was a big factor on their power play, scored 7 times on that, the second highest total in a single season. So Wheeler, a good player, a veteran player, like you just mentioned, Eric, but what are your thoughts on him, and how do you think, well, I'll ask you this. Losing Kane, losing Tarasenko, that's something that we expected. But we knew that the Rangers needed to kind of replace that production, find some replacements for that hole. Do you think that they found that with Blake Wheeler? Do you think this is a capable replacement for the likes of Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko?
Yeah, I mean, I fully think that he's capable. Clearly, he's not on like the level of star power as Patrick Kane or Tarasenko. So they're not. He's not going to be doing anything flashy or like all star stuff like that. But he's going to be a solid player who's going to hopefully pair very well alongside whoever he's playing against, and he's going to help to produce points. And the big thing about Blake Wheeler is that he is a big guy. He's like more of a power forward, so he'll bring a little bit of physicality as well. And, the biggest complaint that people are going to have is that he is old. He's 36. He's going to be 37 by the time the season starts. So he's pretty much towards the end of his career. That's why we only signed him for 1 year. But throughout this one season that's coming up, I think he's going to be a solid addition. Despite his age, he still managed to put up 55 points in 72 games. So it's not like he's really like starting to do nothing. He's regressing a little bit, but it's not going to be anything too crazy that's going to hurt the Rangers very much. So overall, I'm pretty satisfied with it. I know when I woke up early yesterday, I saw all these tweets and speculations that Blake Wheeler was like eyeing the Rangers as his top choice. And in my mind, I was like, that's a little scary because of how old he is. But like, as long as we signed him to a short deal for like less than like 1.5 mil, I would see the positives in it. So to see that we got him for literally like 800K, that I think that's like a pretty solid win. We didn't go out there and waste a bunch of money on this old declining winger. We got him for 1 year, really, really cheap, like the cheapest you could possibly get on anyone. So overall, I think he's going to fit very nicely somewhere into the top six there.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you. But let's go ahead and talk about the defense, right? Because the Rangers lost a defenseman this offseason. Nico Mikkola, player that they acquired at the trade deadline midway through last season. He's headed to the Florida Panthers on a 3-year, $7.5 million deal, which is obviously outside of the Blue Shirts price range. They had to let him walk there. So instead, they get Eric Gustafsson. I think I said that right. Eric, you can correct
Gustafson.
me if I'm wrong. Say it.
Gustafson.
Gustafson, Eric Gustafson, to a 1 year, $825,000 contract. 70 games played last year, split time with the Washington Capitals and the Toronto Maple Leafs. 31 years old, so another veteran, aging guy to add to the mix. 7 goals, 35 assists, scored a goal in 2 playoff games for the Maple Leafs as well. And key here is that he has familiarity with new head coach Peter Laviolette, which makes us potentially a really good signing for the team. Having the familiarity with the coach. I think we're seeing a trend here since bringing Laviolette in. The Rangers are targeting veteran players who are established and experienced, which I do think is a benefit, and we should discuss that as well, Eric. The Rangers emphasizing getting these veteran players that have, Stanley Cup experience or at least just postseason experience. I think that's important considering we're in that win now phase and we're in this cup window and we want to try and win the cup. Getting these guys who have that experience in the postseason is extremely important. So I think that's another thing to mention with this signing as well. But what are your thoughts on this being the Nico Mikkola replacement, and how do you think that he fits in with Peter Laviolette's defensive core?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure that we'll see him play a whole lot this season. Our top four defensemen are already pretty solidified, like locked in. It's going to be Lindgren and Fox, and it's going to be Miller and Trouba. And one of the things that we saw throughout last season was just like the revolving door of defensemen of who was playing alongside Braden Schneider. Zach Jones played a little bit, Nico Mikkola played a little bit, Ben Harper. And then eventually we settled for Mikkola. Zach Jones showed a lot of potential, and we eventually sent him back down to develop down in the AHL for pretty much the rest of the season. So chances are that Zach Jones is going to get his shot to play up in the big leagues full time alongside of Schneider. But what I really like about this Eric Gustafson signing is that it's really cheap. He's established an NHL career, and he's shown that he can play both throughout the regular season and the playoffs. So his purpose to me is to serve as like sort of competition, and just add on to that depth where, we can have a young guy in Zach Jones up in the NHL playing alongside Braden Schneider. But if he starts to play poorly, we're not going to be thrown into another situation where we're like, well, now who's going to fill in that spot? We have this depth where it's like, if you have a couple bad games in a row, you're going to get scratched and sent down, and we're not going to be kind of screwed because of it. So I expect throughout the season, Gustafson and Zach Jones kind of interchange a little bit throughout the season just to play on that third defensive pairing. So I think it's a great signing, in my opinion, for that role specifically.
Yeah, I agree with you. And again, I just think the experience, is really the key here. And that's what we're seeing with all of these signings. We're seeing two trends with these signings from Chris Drury this offseason. We're seeing a lot of experience and we're seeing very cheap contracts, all affordable. I believe that all of the contracts that were signed on Saturday had a cap hit of under $825,000. So you're talking about getting bargains. You're talking about getting good value. And the next one that we want to talk about, 35-year-old Nick Bonino at a 1 year, $800,000 contract, an Italian American who I really like, Stanley Cup experience, but again, cheap contract. So, Eric, what are your thoughts on that signing? Once again, getting a veteran guy here, noticing the trend of $800,000 or less on all of these contracts. I want to know what your opinion is on that as well, how affordable all these deals have been.
Yeah, I mean, I like Nick Bonino. He's one of those guys who like tore up the league on Pittsburgh throughout the postseason a couple of years ago. He's been a huge part of multiple Stanley Cup winning teams. So to just add on to that depth, it's a huge part. And I think that that's pretty much the main story of like every single one of these guys that we signed. Like we also signed Riley Nash, Pitlick, a couple other names out there. They're all just going to be solid fourth line depth players where our fourth line throughout last season, it was like I was a little 50-50 on it. Jimmy Vesey always played pretty solid. Barclay Goodrow had his games where he was good, and then half the time he was kind of weird. And then that other spot was kind of just like thrown around, with that center. But what Drury went out and did yesterday on Saturday was he went out and he found all of the pretty solid, already established veteran NHL fourth liners. So it's kind of like the same thing where I just said with Eric Gustafson, where we're going to have our fourth line. If I had to assemble a fourth line right now to these guys, I would just say VC, Bonino, Pitlick. But if any one of those guys starts to play horrible, we can easily just scratch them, not play them for a game, and have 3 or 4 solid other guys that can go in there and prove themselves to like have a steady position on the roster. So that's what I really like about what we did, where we have our established top 6 already with like Kreider, Zibanejad, Kakko, Panarin, Hedel, or Trocheck, and Blake Wheeler is probably going to fill in that other second line right wing. And then every other one of these signings is just depth, which I think we really, really need. So, especially with Nick Bonino, I think that might have been the best depth signing that we had throughout all of Saturday. I'm pretty happy with all of them, all under 825K. It's perfect. We signed a bunch of guys and we still have around like 7.9 million left to re-sign Lafreniere and Miller. So I think it's all perfect.
Yeah, I think that it's been a really meticulous start to the offseason for Chris Drury, finding those cheap guys and being frugal with their spending. I think it's really important as well. And again, taking a look at Bonino, 35 years old, as we mentioned, scored 10 goals and 9 assists during the 62 games last season, 133 playoff games in his career, 19 goals, 29 assists, 2 Stanley Cups, as you mentioned, Eric. So all of the experience in the world right there. And it's really important that the Rangers get these guys with the experience as they make this run for the Cup. So I like all of these signings. These three in particular that we just mentioned are my favorites of the offseason so far. But I think that we should also transition and now preview what those contracts might look like for Alexi Lafreniere and Keandre Miller, right? Because the Rangers, yes, they signed like 10 players, but these are the top three acquisitions that are really worth breaking down. Eric, if you have anybody else that you want to mention, go ahead, dive into them. But I really want to know your thoughts and opinions on Lafreniere and Miller as the Rangers prepare to extend these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think just before Lafreniere and Miller, one of the signings that I feel like people aren't talking enough about is Jonathan Quick. We signed him to pretty much replace Halak as our backup goaltender. Quick is old; he's 37, but he has won 2 Stanley Cups. One of them, he like beat the Rangers in the finals. But he grew up a Rangers fan. He's a very, very well established NHL goaltender. Probably going to make it into the Hall of Fame one day. So we already know that Igor is really, really good. But just to have someone of Quick's caliber behind him to just continue to mentor him, I think it's going to be really good. And I see it as an improvement over Halak. I think Quick is going to be probably like similar numbers, but more steady throughout the season. Just wanted to throw my opinion out on that one really quick. But as for Lafreniere and Miller, I think the number is 7.9 million that we have left, and that's just kind of a small number. I think Miller is definitely going to get the bigger contract. I could probably see him making close to 4.5 million per year. Probably going to have to keep it on a short deal, maybe like 2 or 3 years, just to keep that AAV down a little bit. Lafreniere, on the other hand, we're probably not going to have the opportunity to make a long tenured signing as well. Kind of like what the Devils did with Jack Hughes, where they just signed him for really, really long, really, really cheap because they knew he was going to just like break out and explode for 70 to 80 points the next season. Lafreniere is probably going to get around like a 2x2, 2 years, 2 million maybe. I don't think he deserves any more than 3. But hopefully both of these players are just aware of the situation that the Rangers are in right now, where they're strapped for cash. Just take a bridge deal, stick around throughout that time, and then hopefully in a couple years, once the cap starts to keep raising and it's not just flat like it is this year, they'll have the opportunity to sign long term.
Yeah, and right now the Rangers, just to clarify, have 6.1 million in projected cap space according to Cap Friendly.
That's
So a
less.
little bit less, yeah, a little bit less than you expected, almost 2 million less than you expected. And as we mentioned, Lafreniere, Miller, those are the main priorities now with the rest of the roster pretty much filled out. I don't think there's much more work for the Rangers to do. I will say, though, big takeaway, the Rangers got a lot older this offseason. This is an old team. Other than the kids, there's really not a lot of young players out there on these lines. You're looking at a 36-year-old in Blake Wheeler, a 35-year-old in Bonino, VC's 30, Tyler Pitlick, 31, Alexis Belzile, 31, 32 with Chris Kreider, of course, 31 for Panarin, and 30 for Zibanejad, and 29 for Trocheck. So this is a pretty old team. The only guys that you have under the age of 25 are Hedel, Kakko, and Lafreniere on those starting offensive lines. So it's an old team now. It's win now. But I could see this really going a couple of ways. I don't know how this is going to really shake out for the Rangers this upcoming season, but all of these veterans need to step up and make an instant impact. There's no time to waste. They're going to have to step in and really, really turn things up a notch and push the Rangers into the postseason. But I think that this upcoming year, it's all about these kids. They have to have that breakout. We're just talking about Lafreniere. He's going to get probably a little extension, I'd say, similar to what Kakko got last offseason, around 2 million or so. but he needs to break out on that contract. And so does Kako. They need to step up and really prove that there is a future here for the New York Rangers. I know that there was discussion about the Rangers maybe even trading Lafreniere this offseason, as they've already got him as a restricted free agent. They absolutely can trade him. I think their goal is to sign him, but his versatility to play left side and right side is really important. And I think that he's ready for a top 6 role with Capo Caco. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. But I think that this is a year where it's put up or shut up for the kid line. So, Eric, before we wrap up, what are your closing thoughts really just on the construction of this lineup as we kind of wrap up what the Rangers can do here in this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of to like emphasize what you just said, most of the signings outside of Blake Wheeler are all just fourth line depth. Capo Caco is like literally all but confirmed to be playing up on that first line with Kreider and Zibanejad. I think when it comes to the success of the team, it really is going to come down to how Kako plays up there on the first line. He needs to have like a very consistent, solid season, putting up points along with our star players. And he's shown like all of the potential in the world to do that, especially throughout last season. He played a little bit of time up there with them and he looked really good. So as long as he's able to maintain that, I think that is like the number one key to success is just having Capo Caco do what we all know he can do for like a full solid season.
Yeah, I think consistency is the key with the kids, and it has been for the last several years. We've talked about that to a very, very large extent. The kids have all the potential in the world. They have their moments of brilliance where they flash all of that potential and they propel the Rangers to very crucial victories. But then they have other 3-week periods where they kind of just fall asleep at the wheel. So it's going to be really important this year for those experienced players that the Rangers sign. They got to make an instant impact, but those kids need to be far more consistent and really establish themselves as the stars that we expect them to be. So it's going to be an interesting season for sure. A lot more question marks going into this year than there was going into last year, in my opinion. Of course, new head coach, brand new lines, a lot of veterans. It'll be an interesting year, but of course, we're going to be updating you on everything throughout the season right here on Fireside Rangers. So make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topic down below in the comment section. Make sure you go follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Fireside Rangers. But without further ado, we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Rangers.